This recording was produced by Oregon Trail Baptist Church. If you'd like to get more recordings, or to leave your feedback, please visit us at www.otbchurch.com or write us at P.O. Box 298, Guernsey, Wyoming 82214. We look forward to hearing from you, and we hope that today's recording will not just challenge your thinking, but will transform your life.
All right, let's get started this morning. We are on the Ten Commandments, so let's get started with Exodus 20.
Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou nor thy son nor thy daughter, thy manservant nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day, and hallowed it. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. Exodus 20 verses 3 through 17.
So we are on the sixth commandment, thou shalt not kill. And as we've begun to introduce the commandment, although it's simple, it can actually be a bit complex. And what creates the complexity with this commandment? Okay, and it's been understood or misunderstood in many different ways. What have been some incorrect understandings of thou shalt not kill? I do. You need one? It's the same as last week. It was. Oh, here you go. trade out. How's that? So what's the confusion that happens with the command, thou shalt not kill?
There's intentional.
Okay, so there's manslaughter versus intentional killing. Okay, there's those who think this command means you can't kill a mosquito, you can't kill a wasp, you can't kill an animal. I don't know of anyone who says you can't kill a plant. All right, I don't know of anyone who's gone that far, but what?
After people that say don't kill the trees.
Well, that's true, but the same people would still eat a salad.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know it's kind of getting to the extremes of, but the comics on the front are kind of picking up with that. Do you guys need another handout or? Okay, just flag me down if you do or don't. So we went over some of the misconceptions or some of the things the command did or didn't say. We're going to pick up this week with page 5 with some development of this command in the Old Testament. Now we touched Genesis 9 last week with the Noachian covenant. And here, again, I'm going to take one step back. As Thomas Watson put, the command not to kill or not to murder is twofold. It's forbidding murder, but it's also a duty implied to preserve the life of ourselves and others. Genesis 9, we read in verse 3 to 7, every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you, i.e. you can eat it. As the green herb have I given you all things. But flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, ye shall not eat. And surely your blood of your lives will I require at the hand of every beast. Will I require it at the hand of every man, at the hand of every man's brother. I will require the life of a man. Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God made he man. And you, be ye fruitful and multiply, bring forth abundantly in the earth and multiply therein. So there's a few things going on in this text. There's the command to be fruitful and multiply. There's a value of life. Life is precious, so don't take the life of others. Also, the person who takes another's life must lose his own. Here is the first real concept or mention of capital punishment. There's one other thing kind of going on here in this verse that is foreign to us and maybe a bit creepy. But verse 4 of Genesis 9 says, but the flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall ye not eat. What's up with eating the blood? There's people today who will take a raw steak and the blood is still dripping out of it, and they'll eat it that way, okay? And there's even, I have heard Irish Christians argue for eating blood pudding, and that's okay, it's kind of, it does not sound appetizing to me at all either. But the idea of eating the blood is the ancients knew and they recognized when you lose this liquid, this substance out of your body called blood, you die. They recognized it as a life source. Now, I'm not saying they were scientifically accurate and they knew everything about the blood, but they knew enough that if you lose enough of this blood, your life is gone. Okay? Now, Old Testament actually has some specific laws about what they were supposed to do with some of the blood. They were to bury it. They were to do certain things with the blood that prevented other people from consuming it. Okay, now this sounds really odd and really weird. Why would someone want to consume blood? Well, part of it gets into, sadly, probably the best thing I can correlate it to is your Halloween vampire idea. Okay? By taking in blood, you were taking in the power and life of something else. You were absorbing their life power and get yourself getting stronger. Did that actually happen scientifically? No, but that was a thought process. And so there's an element here as the verse is giving the command against eating or drinking blood. there's an element here that your life is your own, and you shouldn't be, the death of someone else should not be to feed or bolster your own life. Does that make sense? And again, it's very foreign to us because we don't think in that realm. We don't think of in the realm of, if I kill this person and I drink their blood, this is just sounding gross, I'll be stronger. We just don't think there. But the Canaanites did. The ancient world did. Now the Jews were forbidden to do that, but a lot of different cultures in the ancient world did have that in the back of their mind. So there's several points in the Old Testament where God forbids that. Numbers 35. This here, if you want to turn there, it's actually a pretty long chapter, but it has a lot about manslaughter. Numbers 35. And again, we may separate the word kill here as murder versus all killing. However, the same word for the Hebrew word for murder is used of manslaughter. Now, that doesn't make it on purpose, but it's not quite the same division we have in English today. Numbers 35, kind of a long chapter, but there's a lot to it here. I'm going to read most of the chapter here just to get you the flavor of what's going on. And the Lord spake unto Moses in the plains of Moab by Jordan near Jericho, saying, Command the children of Israel that they give unto the Levites of the inheritance of their possession cities to dwell in, and ye shall give also unto the Levites suburbs for the cities round about them. And the cities shall they have to dwell in, and the suburbs of them shall be for their cattle and for their goods and for all their beasts. And the suburbs of the cities which ye shall give unto the Levites shall reach from the wall of the city and outward 1,000 cubits round about. So they're giving clear measurements of these cities. How far out will be considered the territory of the city. Verse 5. And ye shall measure from without the city on the east side 2,000 cubits, and on the south side 2,000 cubits, and on the west side 2,000 cubits, and on the north side 2,000 cubits. And the city shall be in the midst. This shall be to them the suburbs of the city. And among the cities which ye shall give unto the Levites, there shall be 6 cities for refuge, which ye shall appoint for the manslayer, that he may flee thither. And to them ye shall add 42 cities. So the cities which ye give to the Levites shall be 48 cities. Them shall ye give with your suburbs. So the Levites are going to have their own cities. Remember, they don't get any specific land within Israel. This is part of God's design, actually. The Levites, it was from the Levites you had priests. So by spreading the Levitical tribe throughout all the land, there's an element where those who dealt with the temple and those who dealt with the sacrificial system, those who were in touch with the whole religious system, they were spread out throughout the land. So when God said, none of you are very far from hearing my word, there's a city of refuge within 10 miles of any nation in Israel. Is how they kind of got spread out. So a Levitical city within 10 miles, and then there's several of these cities of refuge. Verse 8. And the cities which ye shall give shall be of the possession of the children of Israel. From them that have many shall ye give many, but from them that have few shall ye give few. Every one shall give of his cities unto the Levites according to the inheritance which he inherited. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When ye come over Jordan into the land of Canaan, then ye shall appoint you cities to be cities of refuge for you, that the slayer may flee thither, which killeth any person unawares. Okay, so clearly this is someone who's committed murder. We wouldn't use the term murder. We'd use the term manslaughter. They've killed, it was unaware, they didn't get it. They flee to one of these cities so the family couldn't come after them. Life for life retribution here. Verse 10, Ye shall appoint you cities to be cities of refuge, that the slayer may flee thither, which killeth any person unawares. And they shall be unto you cities for refuge from the avenger, that the manslayer die not, until he stand before the congregation in judgment. And of these cities which ye shall give, 6 cities shall ye have for refuge. Notice here in verse 12, there's going to be a judgment. Okay, these guys don't simply get a run to the city and say it was an accident. They're going to stand before sort of a group of judges that are going to actually determine, was this an accident or not? Interestingly enough, I might be getting ahead of myself. Old Testament law had a lot to do about preserving life. Okay, one of the rules for that was if you build a house, you have to put a battlement or a fence around your roof. Okay, now none of us have fences on our roofs. Why would they do that? Why would they have a law like that?
It was a deck.
Okay, it was like a deck. So there's a law specifically there that when you build your house, which generally the top layer of their house, they'd often sleep there at night because it was cooler and outside. You put a railing around it, so people fall off. I mean, it sounds duh, but it's that take precaution to save life. We might think of somebody who takes a manhole cover and it up and doesn't put any cones around it, and then somebody walks over and falls through. Well, there's commands in the Old Testament about that. If you dig a pit and you don't fill it in or you don't cover it, if someone falls in, you're at fault. So there's deliberate laws preserving life, which in this case with someone who's committed manslaughter, they're going to have to stand before a council or a judge and a group of people, and they're going to determine, was this, could you have avoided this? Did you do something wrong here? Also, if there's a family grudge or feud, and then, it was just an accident. Okay, so this isn't a get out of jail free card, but it is an opportunity to give some leniency for the person who's accidentally committed manslaughter. Verse 13, and of these cities which ye shall give, 6 cities ye have for refuge. Ye shall give 3 cities on this side Jordan, and 3 cities which ye give in the land of Canaan, which shall be cities of refuge. These 6 cities shall be a refuge, both for the children of Israel and for the stranger, and for the sojourner among them, that every one that killeth any person unawares may flee thither. And if he smite him with an instrument of iron so that he die, he is a murderer. The murderer shall surely be put to death. If he smite him with throwing a stone, wherewith he die, and he die, he is a murderer, and the murderer shall surely be put to death. Or if he smite him with an hand weapon of wood, wherewith he may die, and he die, he is a murderer. The murderer shall surely be put to death. So, what is it made very clear in the last few verses here? Intentional. Okay, if you're using a weapon and it's intentional, this is not manslaughter. This is not manslaughter. It's intentional. The consequence for that is death, which lines up here with the book of Exodus, thou shalt not kill, and then that carried with it the death penalty, the same penalty from the Noachian covenant. You take life, by your life shall be taken too. Verse 19, the revenger of blood himself shall slay the murderer. When he meeteth him, he shall slay him. But if he thrust him of hatred, or hurl at him by lying of weight that he die, or in enmity smite him with his hand that he die, he that smote him shall surely be put to death. For he is a murderer, the revenger of blood shall slay the murderer when he meeteth him. But if he thrust him suddenly without enmity, or cast upon him anything without lying of weight, or with any stone wherewith a man may die, seeing him not, and cast it upon him that he die, and was not his enemy, neither sought his harm, then the congregation shall judge between the slayer and the revenger of blood, according to these judgments. So here, the avenger of blood here is given a little bit of, if you kill my family, they come after you. But if this person got to a city of refuge, they couldn't touch you. Kind of almost like capture the flag or something, it sounds like, except this is serious. And if you leave that city of refuge, if you leave it and its suburbs, you're fair game. So there is a preservation of life here, but also it's saying here in verses 23 and 20, if it's a stone or something else, if it's an accident, again, there's going to be a judgment. One of the things, I don't know, when I was in college, I went and split wood with some guys, and I think maybe differently than other people. Because when, this is the way my dad had us do it, when we split wood, you're swinging that axe, let's say this way. So the other guy splitting wood, I don't want him straight in front of me and I don't want him straight behind me. You know what I'm saying? Because if I lose control of the axe, if the axe comes off, it can be fatal. Now, if he's to my left or to my right, unless I'm doing something incredibly stupid or crazy, it's not likely going to fly in that direction. So I was with some guys in college, and there was just, that concept was just not there. And I don't know if it was, they'd only seen this done in movies or what, but it's like, hey guys, stand directly behind the person chopping and don't stand directly in front of him. So that type of thing is saving life by being cautious and preventing. And that's a manslaughter, someone who failed on one of those accounts or did something on accident. 25. And the congregation shall deliver the slayer out of the hand of the revenger of blood, and the congregation shall restore him to the city of his refuge, wherefore he was fled. And he shall abide in it unto the death of the high priest, which was anointed with the holy oil. But if the slayer shall at any time come without the border of the city of his refuge, whither he was fled, and the revenger of blood find him without the borders of the city of his refuge, the revenger of blood kill the slayer, he shall not be guilty of blood, because he should have remained in the city of refuge until the death of the high priest. But after the death of the high priest, the slayer shall return into the land of his possession. So these things shall be for a statute and a judgment unto you throughout your generations in all your dwellings. Whoso killeth any person, the murderer shall be put to death by the mouth of witnesses. But one witness shall not testify against any person to cause him to die. Moreover, ye shall take no satisfaction for the life of a murderer, which is guilty of death, but he shall surely be put to death. And ye shall take no satisfaction for him that is fled to the city of his refuge, that he should come again to dwell in the land until the death of the high priest. So ye shall not pollute the land wherein ye are, for blood it defileth the land, and the land cannot be cleansed of the blood that is shed therein, but by the blood of him that shed it. Defile not therefore the land which ye shall inherit, wherein I dwell, for I the Lord dwell among the children of Israel. Again, an interesting concept here. The shedding of blood, the shedding of innocent blood defiles the land itself. And I'm not sure all the cultural concepts behind that, but innocent blood being shed defiles the land. Now, did innocent blood get shed while Israel was ruling the land, while the Jews were ruling? What are some cases where you can think of that? How about when they themselves got involved in child sacrifice? There's innocent blood being shed, it's polluting the land. That's to me the first one that comes to my mind. So Numbers 35 has a lot here on the manslaughter laws. It makes it clear that the refuge was for those guilty of unpremeditated accidental killing. It makes it clear that the word here applies to both premeditated murder and the killing as a result of other circumstances, or as English law has, manslaughter. So that same word for murder that we have in the Ten Commandments is used all through this passage, both of the person who's killed deliberately and the person who's killed not. Again, conceptually, there is the division. Murder, killing are two different things. Both murder and killing result in the death of a person. But murder is the premeditated, unjust killing whereas killing could be either or. It's a broader term. Deuteronomy 22, this is what I mentioned before, has, when thou buildest a new house, thou shalt make a battlement, a railing for thy roof. That thou bring not blood upon thine house, if any man fall from thence. Okay, so there's the precautions to save life. Deuteronomy 21 has this kind of what to do when there's the unsolved murder. There was this strange ceremony that was performed when the murderer or manslayer was not known. So since there was religious implications, murder was a crime against God. You're taking the life of someone else. That life belongs to God. The matter could not be left alone. The guilt had to be atoned for. So the elders of the closest city were obligated to take responsibility for the act and instigate a procedure to remove the guilt. They took a heifer and broke its neck. They then washed their hands over the dead creature, symbolizing their acceptance of the burden of it, but not for the guilt. Then they declared that they were not eyewitnesses and prayed for the innocence of the entire community. There was no compensation for the family of the victim. So, if someone's found dead and nobody has a clue what happened, this ties into the not letting the land get polluted idea. So there was kind of a ceremony for unsolved murders. Any comments or questions before we go to the New Testament? I was reading through Kings this week, and in battle, Saul kills himself because he's already wounded. So he's taken his own life, and that's even considered murder, is taking your own life, because who owns that life? It's God. Now, it becomes sometimes a difficult question. And the reason it can become a difficult question today is when someone's brain dead, but we can, mechanically it's not, with medicine we can keep their heart pumping, but they're absolutely not there. At what point is that murder, and at what point is that just you're hopelessly holding on to keeping that heart beating? You know what I'm saying? And that's where there's a fine today. I don't think, back then they didn't have the medicine, they didn't have the medical equipment to do what we can do today. But if there's signs of life, if there's signs of activity, I don't think you should pull the plug. But if everything's gone and there is absolutely no hope, they can keep their tissue going for a long time. But is that even you there? You know what I'm saying? So, there is, and that's going to be a case-by-case basis, and truly I would hope that no Christian would be wanting to pull the plug on somebody just to pull the plug, all right? But we recognize that we're living in a time when science is able to allow us to save and preserve life for much longer than the ancient world. And so there's always a question of the ethics of when to pull the plug. And so anyway, New Testament reflections on this command. In the Gospels, Christ said in the Sermon on the Mount, "Ye have heard that it was said by them of old time, Thou shalt not kill, and whosoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment. But I say to you, that whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment, and whosoever shall say to his brother, Raka, or thou fool, shall be in danger of the council. But whosoever shall say, thou fool, shall be in danger of hellfire." So Jesus starts off with affirming that murder is wrong. But he layers on top of that a condemnation not simply of the act of murder, but of the hatred and anger of the heart that murder comes out of. There are people who may have never committed murder in the physical sense, but if they could and they could get away with it, they would. You know what I'm saying? There's the thought process there. As believers, as followers of Christ, the root problem for us would be anger and bitterness and hatred. When we harbor that, we're on the road to actual murder. We may not be there yet, but God sees the sins of our heart. And so Christ condemned the evil disposition of the heart that lays at the root of the transgression. In the epistles, Paul calls for us to bless our persecutors. So not only is it, thou shalt not kill, but Paul says in Romans 12, he says, bless them which persecute you, bless and curse not, rejoice with them that do rejoice, and weep with them that weep. Be of the same mind one toward another. Mind not high things, but condescend to men of low estate. Be not wise in your own conceits. Recompense to no man evil for evil. Provide things honest in the sight of all men. If it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves. Remember that avenger of blood, he could come after someone. Paul's adding, or he's going beyond that. He's saying, dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in doing so, thou shalt heap coals of fire upon his head. So Paul is calling for us not simply to not kill someone, okay? Not be angry with them, but he's calling for us to even go beyond that and to actually love them and to actually do good for them. And that heaping coals of fire on their head, there's a couple different ways that's been taken, and we're not sure exactly where that comes from, but there was an ancient custom that dealt with some of this where you would literally carry the coals for someone else's fire so they didn't have to make their fire, and you would bring them the coals, and so you're actually helping them with their daily tasks that they have to do when you're their enemy. And the end result is it shames them. Well, Paul's not wanting us to shame one another per se, but the idea is we're to show the love of Christ to others in such a way that honestly they feel guilty. I read as I was studying the fruits of the Spirit years ago, David Jeremiah recounts a story where he accidentally cut off someone as he was coming into a fast food restaurant. He didn't mean to do it. He did it. They were angry. They honked at him. He could see in his rearview mirror they were ticked, and he could see them fuming in the car behind. So he gets to the window, and he didn't mean to. It was an accident, but he had done wrong, and he knew he did. So what he did was he asked the clerk at the window, can I pay for the car behind me too? So they got their meal, but he paid for both meals. But he pulled forward to wait to watch their expression once they went to pay, because they didn't have to pay. And that's a good example of heaping coals of fire on their head. Yes, they're mad at you. Yes, they're upset with you, but you're doing everything you can, kind and considerate to them. And again, with the command not to kill, it's also that element of preserving, keeping life. So you've done something wrong to somebody, do everything you can to make their life better. Paul also sees here in the same book of Romans, the government bearing of the sword, this phrase he used, as a minister of God to keep evil in check. In Romans 13, the command to let every soul be subject unto the high, for there's no power but of God. Ye are ordained of God. He's government, not angels or anything like that. Whosoever there resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. Rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. For he is a minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid, for he that beareth the sword in vain. For he beareth not, the sword in vain. For he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. Government systems, it doesn't matter how bad or corrupt they are, they all want order. Even a fascist or communist government, they want order. They want peace to a certain degree. Now, I understand a communist or socialistic or fascist government, they may want cruelty too, may want to conquer the world, all sorts of things, but they still want their order in their society, because chaos in society never any government. All right, it never helps. So Paul's living in the Roman government with emperors, and he, as much as possible, obeyed their laws. but he couldn't at every point. They're called to worship the emperor as king or as a god. He couldn't do that because Christ is the only true God. So there is time, but the whole governments bear the sword. For a government to kill somebody, as far as as a result of their crimes or a punishment, or even in war, that's allowed. Now, governments need to be very careful what they do in war. Governments need to think clearly and carefully before they engender the killing and destruction of many lives. We were watching a thing on World War II, and these two SOE agents of Churchill took out, not Heinrich Himmler, it was one of the other Himmlers, and they were able to assassinate him in the middle of the war. And the Nazis got back. They did everything they could to catch these two agents who assassinated this high-ranking German officer. But in the meantime, they killed 5,000 Czech people. So there's a cruelty there, and we would see that as evil government bearing the sword wrongfully. But for our government to be involved in warfare that's protecting our land and our homes, that's keeping us from having the battle here at home, could you imagine? Not this is the biggest thing in the world. What would happen to your real estate value if we're in a war zone? Not only could your house be lost, but if Canada took over, not that they have any plans to, maybe I don't know. If Canada took over and now you no longer, your deed to your house means nothing and now it belongs to somebody from there, that creates chaos in society. So for our government to protect our home to where we have freedom, to have stability, they have every right to do so. Now the struggle through history has been every tribe against every other tribe. When people like Germany or others try to get more or try to take advantage of more or try to control more or steal more, Russia, historically, they've always wanted a warm water seaport. So my history teacher said, and if you look at the wars they fought, it's always the case. The Black Sea is the closest to a warm water seaport that they could probably get to, a port that they could have all year without freezing, and even today they're kind of making advancements that way, with what they're doing. So, there is things here where the government must be careful, but they have the right from God to bear the sword. Quote here before we move on. To kill an offender is not murder, but justice. A private person sins if he draws a sword. A public person sins if he puts up the sword. You think about that. Someone who's killed 2 or 3 people, if the government doesn't stop them, they're going to take 2 or 3 more lives. Which life is more valuable, the innocent or the perpetrator? That's really where the question falls. James adds, and we get this going through it, that murder is a consequence of frustrated desire. Ye kill and have not, ye lust and have not. Ye kill and desire to have and cannot obtain. Ye fight in war, yet ye have not, because ye ask not. Very quickly, when someone doesn't get what they want, it can go to violence quickly. And that's just, James is noting that, and I think we've seen that, you've probably seen that in your own life. By way of application, all life belongs to God, human and animal. But God has given us as humans dominion over the earth. We're to preserve and keep it. That doesn't mean every animal we need to keep alive. Doesn't mean we need to go on an extermination spree per se. But we're to manage and keep it. We can kill to eat. However, ruthless slaughtering and manslaughter, or not manslaughter, but just slaughtering of animals, that's not appropriate either. But life belongs to God. It's valuable. We should preserve it. Our inward attitudes will produce outward actions. So what Christ said about not hating your neighbor, we should stop and think about that. Who is my enemy? Who's someone who's against me? How do I treat them? How do they treat me? And do I harbor hatred towards anyone? And if so, that needs to be dealt with. So although we may not be guilty of killing someone in real life, are we murder in the mind? I've included with this lesson a couple articles. You can read them alone on your own time. The first is one that several years ago, I can tell you where I read this. I read it in Singapore. I picked the book up off a shelf, and this was by Thomas Watson, and it just stuck with me so firmly that I had to pull it up for this lesson. But he talks about murder, how we can take someone's life without taking their whole life away. He gets into how we can psychologically murder someone, or we can take away their personality, or by slandering them, we murder their testimony and thus alter their life. And he has 12 different ways where we can murder. Also, there's another one by John Corson. He's still alive. He says, "Are you a murderer too?" And so, 2 encouraging articles that I found on the topic. You can read those at the end on your own time. Comments or questions? Going twice. All right, let's close in a word of prayer. Lord, we thank you for your word. And Lord, you as the creator of life and sustainer of life, desire for us to take the same role in doing what we can to preserve life. For many of us, Father, I don't know of anyone in this room who've actually murdered anyone by taking their life. But some of us may be guilty of hatred of others. We may be guilty of doing things to others that take away their opportunities, take away really even their capacity to live in a free and fruitful way. Lord, would you help us in our hearts and lives to live in such a way that we give life. We allow others to see the life that you give through your death on the cross. And we open up their opportunities to walk with you. Would you help us now and be with us as we close out and have our service in a few minutes to follow in your Son's name. Amen.